Before we begin, we just want to take time to do our land acknowledgement. And our land acknowledgement reads as the following, which was proposed on January 9, 2019 to the college as a whole, but then to our president as well. So we're excited to now do our land acknowledgement before events. Our land acknowledgement reads as the following. On behalf of North Seattle College, we acknowledge that we occupy the traditional ancestral land of the coastal Squamish people, specifically the Duwamish tribe, a people that are still here today. We continue to honor and bring light to their ancestral heritage. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering, to this dialogue and learning space. We ask that you take the opportunity to thank our original caretakers of this land that are still here today. Thank you. And now at this time, we'll have President Brown.
Great, thank you. Come on up, there was one applause. Okay, so Seattle Pathways, what is it all about? And then we're going to transition and talk about Seattle Promise. So with Seattle Pathways, I want to just give a little bit of an opening to let you know where I'm at. When Seattle Pathways has been talked about is really with the framework of guided pathways, which is part of a national movement. For me, this has really been an evolving thought I've had about guided pathways. It was, I guess about 4 years ago, Chancellor Wakefield got a good sense of the guided pathways conversation nationwide, and that there was some funding for colleges to be in an earlier pilot of guided pathways. So at the table was myself, Paul Kilpatrick, who was the president of Central at that time, and then Gary Ortley, who was the president at South at that time. And I thought, if I don't believe in something, I'm not going to commit to college. So we all looked at Gary Ortley at South and said, Gary, how about you take this on? And he thought that it was fitting for South to take it on because of the huge lift. And I think maybe in the back of his mind, he knew he was going to be retiring, so he decided to go first. So my methodology with everything is, I never really want to be the first mouse to the cheese. I want to be the second mouse. And I'm pretty transparent. If I don't believe in something, I can't sell it to the college community, so I have to really believe it first. So I probably wouldn't be a good car salesman. So initially that's how it started within the Seattle district, and then South went forward and did the grant that provided them the resources to start with guided pathways. At the same time, I was really thinking about the Guided Pathways Initiative and had a lot of questions about it. It's like, well, what does it really mean if you're not on the pathway? Who is on the pathway and who's not on the pathway from an equity perspective? What does this all mean for faculty? Is this just another initiative? And in my mind, I thought about the multiple initiatives that the colleges together individually were doing. Declare and prepare, ready, set, transfer, it goes on and on. So I had a lot of questions. So I was able to kind of watch what South was doing and how they engaged in the work. Meanwhile, nationally, more colleges got in the Guided Pathways framework. The whole state of California, with all their community colleges, said they're going to do guided pathways. So for me, the kind of epiphany was really only recently, as I spent more time to really read what guided pathways is all about. And that began to answer some of my questions and my hesitations. And then with the opportunity that a group of us had in New Orleans to really dive a little bit deeper in that. So I know that the Chancellor has said that guided pathways is something we're moving forward as a district. We're calling it Seattle Pathways, which is part of an acknowledgement that there are these initiatives that have been happening across our district and continue to happen across the district, which makes it unique for Seattle, but we call it Seattle Pathways. So for me, the epiphany was this. So my first concern had to do with how does this work with outreach, right? That guided pathways must mean it's only for people that are here now, students that are here now. What do we do for outreach for the students that haven't even got here yet, or haven't even thought about college yet? So the more I learned about it, that's part of Pillar 2 in Guided Pathways. It's making sure that you work with not just the colleges, but with K-12, and work with universities too to help expand the pipeline. You know, the question that I had about, well, what happens if people are on pathways that may not provide equity? And I'd seen the Seattle College data where our students of color and underrepresented students are typically in career pathways that are lower wage. So yes, they will complete, but they'll complete in jobs that are not family wage jobs. So I want to know, well, how will Guided Pathways address that? And then learn that there's a whole equity framework within Guided Pathways to engage in that conversation, to make those changes. So I felt a bit better about that. The other thing to note is I want to know, how does counseling work? How does advisors work in the framework? And that's also spelled out as a critical part of Guided Pathways. And then finally, I wanted to know, how does this fit with what's called program mapping, and how do courses get in a program map? And I learned that that's a lot of the work, but it's all based on the faculty's work of what are those classes that go in those pathways. And hearing from South that the faculty have been able to kind of work through that is really encouraging. So all the questions that I had that I was not sure if it was good to be the first mouse to the cheese, I'm feeling a lot better about what Guided Pathways is. And also realizing that Guided Pathways is not a recipe, right? I'm a big believer in multicultural education, and one of the tenets of multicultural education is that you don't essentialize, meaning you don't say, well, because you have this student in front of you, you must teach this way and you must provide these resources. So you can't do that. And Guided Pathways doesn't do that. It has you look at structures, so it's not a formula to itself, but it says, look at all the structures that happens from instruction to student services to other areas of the college as far as how you support and bring in students and retain students. So with that framework, I'm like, okay, now I get it. Now I see that this is really an organizing principle. It's not a set of cookbook recipes. It's an organizing principle where it allows you to bring all of your efforts together to harness it for the benefit of students. And then the very last thing, too, that can underscore it is, why now and why is this meaningful? So I believe that the whole part about any educational institution is that we are, like what Cindy says, that we're learning colleges. We're always learning how to enhance our students' learning, but we're also learning about how to improve the institution. So with Guided Pathways, already we've been able to look at some initial data, and some of the initial data can indicates that we could step up our efforts. Our good efforts we're already doing, but step it up more intentionally to really try to move the needle. And one data source that I think we could all say that we want to do better at is, we have just this past year, fall quarter, there was a bit over 100 students that went through, they went through the gate to first apply for North. They went through the gate to then enroll at North. They went to the next gate to actually show up to class. And well over 100 students that were in a transfer pathway. So they weren't just here to pick up a class, they were intentionally in a transfer pathway, never completed that quarter with a passing grade. So why? There's these system questions of why. And we also know that our persistence rates are really no better than the state average when it looks to year. So we're doing a lot of great work, but Guided Pathways asks us to challenge our institutions and our structures so we can do better work with an equity mindset to move the needle to benefit our students. So I guess this is a long way of saying that. I'm sorry, I guess this is a little bit like a Dr. Phil show as I'm reflecting on who I was and where I am now and where I'm going, but realizing that this really has been for me an epiphany and a growing process of learning what Guided Pathways is about. and why I do think this is the organizing principle that can help us work as hard as we're doing, but focus even more on making the changes that benefit our students. So with that in mind, I think the panel is coming up.
Nope,
Nope,
not yet.
not yet. So what's next on the agenda?
Me.
Oh, Pete.
So I can't really follow Warren's confessional with my own confessional, as I've been through it at South for about the last 4 years. But what I want to do is to build off of Warren's evolution with a little bit of the backdrop of what Guided Pathways looks like nationally, and then talk a little bit about what Seattle Pathways intends to do. So as Warren mentioned, Guided Pathways is a nationwide effort. It started actually more than a decade ago, although it wasn't quite termed Guided Pathways, but it really has, it started, with one goal, and that goal was overarching student success. It was driven by a look at student completion rates, and in particular, completion rates of students who intended to get a 2-year degree, intended to transfer, or intended to get a career and weren't. We know that there are a lot of students who come in to take one class, or to take prerequisites, or to just get enriching education. And those students are important. But the specific data that triggered colleges to look at how they did business were those students who came in saying, I want to get a 2-year degree, I want to get a career after, I want to transfer after, and the nationwide, the rates were below 25%. When we looked at our data at South, we were at about 22%. That's eye-opening when you think that these students, the ones who are intending to come in and put their money and others' money into it, and only 1 out of 5, roughly, was meeting that goal, that's kind of jarring and disconcerting. The second goal, which is actually kind of evolved into the larger Guided Pathways efforts, and I applaud folks at South for really bringing this to the forefront when we went through the AACC work, is the diversity, equity, inclusion, and community part of this. AACC, as the nationwide group, led with student success with an underpinning of the diversity, equity, and inclusion goal. That has evolved, and now these are on equal footing, as they should be. We also know that when we look at our data, we, Seattle colleges, look at our data, there are gaps in achievement. There are gaps in retention, there are gaps in completion, there are gaps in success. And none of us want a predictor of a student's success to be their race or ethnicity. So eliminating, intentionally using that word, eliminating those gaps is a key goal of the Seattle Pathways efforts. Next slide. So again, building off of the Guided Pathways framework nationwide, the 2 cohorts of colleges have gone through AACC. One of them, the first one, South, was involved in. The second one is going on right now. The framework that AACC has set forward with the Guided Pathways efforts involves 4 pillars. And you can see the 4 pillars here. I'm not going to read them, all of it, but it's clarify the path, enter the path, stay on the path, and then ensure that learning is happening. A lot of what we are already doing, you can see, has a place in either one or multiple of these pillars. What we at South used these pillars for was to create the structure of the framework in which we hung all of the efforts that are going on and then framed the work that could move forward. Interestingly, we were just at a meeting 2 days ago with South, Central, North, and the Siegel Center, the district, to talk about district-wide efforts. And South has another concept that they're adding to this pillar. Those are the pipes that are undergirding these pillars. So for instance, financial aid is a pipe that connects multiple pillars. Financial aid is involved throughout the student's journey, and it doesn't fit into any one pillar. It fits, as they're calling them, pipes that are going to be connecting these pillars. So The pillars are an existing framework that's designed. You may also start hearing this term pipe for parts that are connecting the pillars. What we at North are looking at doing, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in my part of the panel, but what we at North are looking at doing is creating an organizational framework that is similar to what South and the district are looking to, and builds off of what we've learned from colleges that have gone through this nationwide. There are multiple examples, and one of the messages that we get from AACC all the time is this is not a quick fix. This is not an initiative. This is a transformation. And so this is going to be a journey. It's going to be a long journey for us. But there are examples throughout the nation where colleges have doubled or more their completion rates and have eliminated those equity gaps. So we have leaders that we can look to, and we have help that can guide us through this as well. So now I get to introduce DeAndre.
Thank you, Pete. Moving forward, what we're excited about, I know the president stated fact number 3, but as you see these, just these 3 points, and we say why, using this, as you read the 3 points, using this data to really be reflective is going to be very, very important. But reflecting on the things that we can do better as a college, but most importantly, reflective on the things that we are already doing as a college to move forward, but using this to be focal points on the problem solving and improving the processes that we have here at North. We'll discuss more in our panel, the 3. What I'm excited about and what everyone has touched on, the president and Pete, is just moving this work that is done nationally. Our next slide will just show just where it's being talked about nationally, but then how we can actually set the standard here within the Seattle colleges, but then most importantly around Seattle and what that looks like. And now a lot of the question was, a lot of this equity work, a lot of this framing of what we're doing in our classrooms, we've been doing it, but we really need the resources to make it happen, and we're excited. And the next part is going to be when I get to introduce our new director, Amy, to really talk about how we plan to make sure that this is happening, and also this is funded at a high level that is very, very important to move the work, but most importantly, how we can make sure we learn. I like how Pete uses this a lot, that we learn from the mistakes of other institutions around the country, but then also how we can be trendsetters and make sure this is actual transformational and doing it at an equity level, but then systematically in our processes. So this is one that we have pulled. Amy pulled a national map. This is a little older. I think most definitely it is more. But as you can see where we're located, and then also California, as the president just stated, where it's being done, and we're excited that it's being done. I get the opportunity now to introduce Amy, and she's going to talk more in depth about the actual thing.
Oh, sorry. You're good.
It's a little bit.
Hey everybody. Hi, I'm Amy Brown. I've been a completion coach at North for the past 3 years, and now I'm really lucky that I get to transition into this work, working with all of you to implement Title III. So what I like about Title III, I'm not going to read the whole goal to you, but it's called the Strengthening Institutions Grant. And what I like about that is that we get to build on the work that we've already done. So, there's been really amazing work happening throughout this campus, but one of the things we know is sometimes it happens in little pockets and not everybody talks and knows what's happening. So this really gets to strengthen our institution and make sure that we're scaling work up, which is great. So in case you haven't heard much about Title III yet, it's a 5-year grant. So we technically started in October, but I started 2 weeks ago. So please give me a little bit of grace. I think we've heard you get 6 months of grace period when you're new. So 2 weeks should be okay. So we have about $2.2 million, and that's really exciting over 5 years. Do keep in mind though, a lot of the funding has been written out for. So the focus areas of the grant include Seattle Pathways, so that's probably the biggest area. So not only do we get to implement this work, but we get some funding in order to make that happen. We also get to focus on strategic enrollment management, increase access to campus resources. So we have a brand new Equity and Welcome Center that's coming. So Title III is providing some furniture for that. So that's going to be really great for our students. And then supplemental instruction. So those are the big focus areas. So there are lots of outcomes required by grants. Anybody who's ever worked on any grant, and especially federal grants, knows that there are lots of different indicators and lots of data involved. And that's a really good thing because we always talk about trying to have data decision making or data-driven decision making. So in terms of Seattle Pathways outcomes, this is the simplified version. So essentially we have to increase our 3-year completion rate of all degree-seeking students and then increase retention rates and close our equity gaps. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Joe, our Vice President of Student Services, who's going to tell us about some of the work that we've completed so far.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Ingrid. So in terms of the work that has gone so far, Seattle Pathways and the title work, we've hired Amy as our Title III Director. So 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks into her role. We've also, or currently are in the process of naming a finalist for the Assistant Director of Advising. And the role of the Assistant Director of Advising is to work closely with our faculty to start creating those program maps that we talked about, which is a strong component of the pillar for Seattle Pathways. We also sent a cross-campus team to New Orleans to learn more about guided pathways. These are the folks that are going to be seated in a panel in a couple of minutes. So we'll get a chance to learn the things that they have, and then also an opportunity for the campus to be able to learn and gain from the experience that they've had in New Orleans. And then Amy, along with South Seattle, went to a retreat in Vancouver, again, to continue learning and sort of getting a good sense of Seattle Pathways and how that work needs to be done for us here at North Seattle. And then also starting up a guiding team. It's a cross-campus team to guide decisions related to Seattle Pathways in Title III. The core of that team is the instructional dean and the student development council, but we have also started the process of opening up, identifying, as well as looking to you for guidance in terms of who else needs to be part of that guiding team. And then also there's a district steering committee formed and are meeting quarterly. That is headed by Dr. Wettleman as well as Ernest Phillips. So also take a look at Seattle Pathways that's happening across the district. Now, we also know that there's great work happening around our campus. So what we'd like for you to do, and as part of our process today, is there are yellow Post-its on the table, and there are large Post-its around the table that correspond to the different pillars. If you could think about the work that you're currently doing now that corresponds with the pillar, at some point during our meeting today, if you could write it down and post it on those Post-its, because what it does, it solidifies the fact that Seattle Pathways is a framework that we're using, but we are currently doing that work now. It's a matter of trying to get a good sense of, as Amy said, those great pockets of work that's happening now, how do we make sure that we use it and we take a look at it and institutionalize it? So that's the update that I have for Seattle Pathways.
So just thinking about next steps that we're going to move into with this work, so there's an intentional focus on career and transfer pathways and additional partnerships. And then we're going to have a guiding team meeting / open house, and we're calling it a y'all come meeting. So if anybody, we would love for people to come on February 13th from 8:30 to 11:30 to see what the guiding team is like, and especially with faculty. We're looking for a lot of faculty participation on that guiding team. So please come. And then just so you know, we're giving you guys an introduction today, but there are going to be additional question and answer forums coming up in the future. So as we dive more into this work, I'm sure you guys are going to have more questions. And one of the big things about Title III is that we need to be communicating with everybody throughout campus. So you will eventually be getting Title III newsletters, and we'll have a website so that you can follow along with the work that's happening and be part of it. And then again, we want to hear everything that's happening. So if anybody does have any questions, feel free to send them to me. And then also, I know this is being recorded, and so sometimes people don't always like to ask questions when things are recorded. So there are index cards that are green on your table. So if you have particular questions that you want us to address at a later time, feel free to write them down, and then we'll be able to address that later. So at this point, if everybody from the New Orleans team who's going to be on the panel will come up and take a seat, they're going to be able to share some information.
So one of the best practices that we did at South, and actually is a part of the Title III funding, is that anytime a team goes to an event, a learning experience, a learning opportunity, a workshop, or whatever, around Seattle Pathways, Guided Pathways, we're committed to sharing what we heard, what we learned, and giving the opportunity for questions. It's a practice that really worked well for us at South, as it kept everybody, or folks who needed and wanted to be, it kept them in the know on what groups were learning, so that the learning wasn't happening in pockets as well. So as groups go to events, to workshops, to institutes, is the case of the group that went to New Orleans, there's a commitment that we'll share, and we will set up events similar to this to share what we heard, and then to give you all a chance to ask questions. And Warren, you can't hide, you gotta come up too. All right. I guess you can't hide.
All of the questions.
All right. I'm gonna help facilitate. Yay! All right, so Chris, you want to start us off? Get us going?
Sure. Is it working?
You have to turn it on.
Hello? Hello?
Here we go. I'm ready.
Hello? Good to see everybody here. This is the New Orleans team. We were ostensibly down there for Guided Pathways, but as Warren can attest, we just partied all day, all night. It was actually quite intensive that day, and I learned a lot. I should say I'm the Dean of Basic and Transitional Studies, so I come at Guided Pathways from a basic skills kind of mindset. I also co-chair the Guided Pathways Committee at our Council for Basic Skills, so I've been thinking about Guided Pathways for a while. I've been interested in basically in favor of it for basic skills students in general, but it was an opportunity to kind of dive deep in New Orleans. I guess our goal is to talk about some things that we learned. Aaron and I went to a breakout session that was basically a project management breakout session, because with Guided Pathways, there's so much going on, and it's such it's a large institutional thing that it can feel a little overwhelming, like what am I supposed to do? What is this first, is this second? So this breakout group was helpful with some project management tips, which I'll talk about the first couple, and then Aaron can talk, or I'll talk about the first one, you can talk about the second one. Essentially what they really recommended was, of course, you need to have a scan of your institution. You need to know what you're looking at before you can start to do things. And this has always been a question that I've had is, I think, the big takeaway is we need to kind of have a data brainstorm where we kind of figure out what are the data questions that we want to ask, and then we want to look at them, and then we might ask some more. But in the end, these data questions might lead us to how are we going to act? And so, for example, one of the ones I often hear is, Oh, so for example, North is a institution with a lot of part-time students, the highest number of part-time students in the state, and the oldest average age of students in the state. And we have a large number of students who come and take prerequisites. We have a large number of students who come and take classes for enrichment. So maybe we're not such a good school for something like guided pathways, which is more aimed towards full-time students and fewer students taking enrichment classes. But I've never actually seen the data. I've never actually seen what number of students are here for prerequisites and what number are not. What number are here for enrichment or not. I've never seen, and just throwing it out there, say 40% of the students at North are here for enrichment, prerequisites, or something like not pathway. That still leaves 60% that are, in some sense, looking for pathways. So, and then who are those 60%? Are they on workforce pathways that are fairly well defined? Or are they swimming around trying to figure out where they're going? How do we get at who these people are and one size is not going to fit all, so we're going to have to be pretty specific figuring out who these people are and how we're going to approach them. And I came back, and I was also thinking about the gaps we have between ethnicity and race, between gender, when we combine gender and race, those gaps. And I just happened to look at basic skills. I popped up ABE and ESL students. What percentage of ESL students, I didn't know, check other for ethnicity or race, and what percentage check nothing. Turns out 37% of ABE and ESL students check other or nothing, which is more than a third, which means a third of the students, we don't really have good information on their ethnicity or race, which means it's going to be hard to measure whether there's a gap there or not when 1/3 of them have nothing to measure. So that leads me to think, okay, how do we get that information? And so when you start to think about that, it's an onboarding process. Are we going to have to shift some things there? Where would that onboarding piece happen? How would we collect that data? Where do we keep it? How do we get it out to everybody so that they can look at it and push back and ask another question? All of this is saying that I think as we move into this, we need to be thinking of questions like to ask about data and how to present that data, and everybody needs to look at it, maybe in this newsletter, and then we need to ask more questions about it so that we can really narrow down and figure it out. What is the scan of our institution, and how are we going to use guided pathways to help those different groups of people succeed? Does that make sense?
Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Corneville, I'm the Dean of Workforce Instruction. So going into the conference, I came in with my professional technical lens, looking at career training programs, and I felt that our division was pretty well positioned to do well within this structure. Many of our programs are already very prescriptive. We have a lot of cohort model programs where the course sequences